Delusion is a great thing when you're young, because you always think at the stage you're at, you think I could draw comics, because if you didn't have that and you knew the road ahead of you, you'd be like, Jesus man, that's a lot of work. I don't know if I can do that.
Hey you. Welcome to the first episode of season 15. It's hard to believe that I started the podcast 5 years ago. It's totally different than what I ever intended it to be. I don't even know if I had much of a vision for it. I just really wanted to get together with some friends and talk. It has been an incredible blessing to meet and talk with the breadth of creators throughout the comic industry. It's been an amazing ongoing therapy session for my young creative heart that put everything into becoming a comic book artist and writer. And then to have walked away from that path and then circled back 20 years later into conversations and into a community that I forgot how much I loved. You know, I say thank you to everyone who has sat down and taken the time to talk and share their experiences and journeys and hardships. While it's the thing that we only imagined possible when little children reading these stories, thinking how amazing it would be to be in this, and then to actually make that come together in one's life is as mind-boggling as it is exciting. Once again, thank you to everyone who has participated in the show as a guest and everybody who has listened. It means the world to me. I know I haven't posted a show in a couple of weeks. We've been away. I just figured I'm not going to push episodes just to have them come out. That may not be the greatest pathway to fame and fortune, but I don't think that's the purpose of this podcast, to churn out episode week after week just to appease a calendar. It's more to capture these unique voices and people making the things that we love. And today's guest for the season 15 premiere is probably a perfect example of that. Danny Earls is a former professional footballer, i.e. soccer player for we on this side of the Atlantic. Danny is like everyone else who grew up loving comic books, but he went off in a different direction because he had another passion, another love, which he manifested into a professional career in sports, which is incredibly hard, the dedication that it takes. And then in his 30s, chose to put his passion toward his love of art and his desire to make comic books. And it's a rare case that somebody steps into this a little bit older and from a truly different side of the human experience. But Danny's dedication to his craft is indicative of his ability to play football at some of the highest levels. In fact, his team won the championship when he was here in the United States for the MLS. So, I mean, he knows how to be a champion. And for him to come into the industry with that passion, and he really has captured the attention of a lot of people. And I categorize Danny as, there are people who, there are different types of comic book creators. You know, there's cartoonists and there's illustrators, and they all have very different approaches to how they do things. And then neither one is better or worse than the other. But there's also the kind of artist who taps into that thing when they're young. That I always refer back to the 12-year-old, but I think Danny's one of those artists who is drawing this idealized version of his 12-year-old spirit onto the page. I think that when an artist can put on the page what our 12-year-old spirits identify with, I think you just capture the minds and the imaginations of readers immediately. And it's not through this sort of like, oh my gosh, like this insane draftsmanship, or did you see how they told the story? Like, that's not the core message. Danny's doing all that stuff, but I think there's something a little deeper happening there. And I really, really have grown to appreciate this as a reader more so than when I was younger. I would really look at what's the quality of the draftsmanship. Are they hitting all of the marks, on this sort of expertise level? And I hope you dig this talk, because we had the best time. It went by so fast. I think we probably could have gone a lot longer, but he's we talk about the hours, and he's putting those hours in every day. And I think it shows on the page, book after book. So this is me with Danny Earls. Perishable skills.
Oh yeah, yours, yeah, for sure.
For sure.
Definitely. Definitely.
I mean, your background, is a mastery of perishable skills. I mean, would you stand on the pitch today, right?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, right.
Totally. I don't know if it was mastery, mind you. That's way too kind a word for that, mate. I worked hard.
Well, but that's the thing. It's like there's, listen, if somebody sent me a script tomorrow and said, "Hey, I need you to pencil this issue," I'd be like, good luck.
Of course, absolutely.
Like all those, like whatever I had is just, moved past. Like I can muscle my way through a drawing now, but I can't draw like I used to draw. Like
that's it, mate. Yeah, it's the old saying, like if you don't use it, you lose it, right? It's like it's as simple as that. Like especially in football, I think football anyway. Like as far as that goes, it's instinctual. Drawing isn't so much instinctual for me. It's took a lot of work to get. It's still not instinctual. It's hard every single day, but football was a lot more of that, so going back into a high level, no chance. Do you know what I mean? Playing as a little five-a-side, you can still kind of get away by being instinctual because other people mightn't be as good, but at a high level, that's every day, like as hard as you can work, focused, no kind of exterior what to say, temptations or anything. It's just purely kind of trying to get as good as you can, I suppose.
Yeah, I came up with this sort of analogy, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. And I said, genius aside, okay? Like we have to take geniuses out of these equations. There's people who are just brilliant at whatever they do with
absolutely
not the same effort that everyone else has to put in. But you can only be world class at one thing at a time. There's no way to be world class at two things. It's just
I fully agree. Fully agree.
Yeah.
There's actually, it's funny. My brother sent on. Did you ever hear Jimmy Carr, the English comedian?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
He was on a podcast, The Diary of the CEO, the other day, and my brother said, because I kind of tend to not listen to things when I work, just try to be kind of no exterior kind of like influences, I suppose. But he sent it to me. He said, just listen from this minute to this minute. I was like, right, boom. And he said that he was like, right. He's like, so he wants to be a comedian, and someone else comes in and says, I'm a comedian, but I have a business here and I have a business there, and he says, fine. He says, you do 50% of that and I'll go 100% at this, and let's see who comes out on top. You know what I mean? He's like, it's so like imperative to kind of, I don't know, I'm quite different, Alex. I kind of have a mentality of like, I like being obsessed. I like kind of overtaking me life. Work-life balance isn't a great thing for me. That's not what I like. I would like to see my fiance more and stuff, but I adore being obsessed with something. I've been lucky enough to have two careers and two passions that I love, and Jesus, that's more than a lot of people can say, so I wouldn't ever take that for granted. I just throw myself into it,
Yeah, it is that work. Like I remember feeling that pull all the way back when I was in art college. Like I remember being out with my friends in the evenings, and all I could think about was like, I really should be back at the drawing board. I should be back there breaking myself, trying to get better at whatever the thing was.
Yeah, it's like, I swear, mate, it's been a real difficult one for me. And listen, I say this in a way, what I'm going to say is the most selfish thing ever, but I don't mean it to sound that way. Do you know what I mean? Anytime I'm with kind of family or friends, I'm just thinking, that panel could have been better. Oh, that expressions could have been better. I have to do this. It's always about hitting deadlines, right? But it's also about the quality of that. It's like, fuck, instead of being here, I could be there. And I'm trying my best to shake it for my family's sake. I don't mind. I can live with that torture. But for my family's sake, I want to be present for them and be like, and my fiance and be like, I'm here with you. I want to be present whenever I can be present. But it's just a thing that it's like, it's that obsessiveness where it's like, it's I don't know. It's not unhealthy because I'm really like happy. Like my mental
Mm-hmm.
state is great. You know what I mean? But I don't know. I kind of thrive off the obsessiveness. I suppose I've had it since I was 15. Alex, I played football and I was obsessed then. I've lived 20 years of it. I don't really know anything else other than throw myself in head first. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the way it is. You know?
Yeah, Danny, it's so familiar to me. Not the football thing. I just enjoy it from the sidelines, but it's this thing about the cyclical chase of you were talking about that panel or whatever, but like I remember like it's just like, oh, my hands suck, and then you would focus on drawing better hands and drawing better hands,
Yeah.
and then you're like, oh yeah, but man, my legs suck, and then you would work on those, and like
Yeah.
you get through all the human body parts, and then you finish and you go, man, those hands really suck.
They
And
suck
then you're
again.
back and
Yeah, it's like it's so true. I kind of try to pick each issue to work on something in particular. Say like, hey, listen, how the trap connects to the shoulder. I'll work on this issue because the Hulk is that right. He's big and powerful. So it's like I'll try to do that, and then it's like you're so true. 3 issues later, you're like, oh man, that's crap. Those hands are crap. You come. It's like cyclical, you know. It's like even hitting deadlines and that, Alex. It's like it's the weirdest thing. Every comic book artist works like crazy hours, right? This is only my like second year in the industry. I tried to when I first broke in, kind of work hours that I knew I would be working to prepare myself for these hours while I am working, you know. So the last deadline I hit for Hulk, it was like I don't ever speak about hours that I work because online and stuff because that's my choice to work those hours, Alex, right? I can turn in work that's kind of subpar or I can give everything I have into it. So it's not like a badge of honor to work long hours or a badge of honor to work shorter hours. It's just what you choose to do. So I kind of don't tend to talk about that. But this is the first time I would say it. Like the 3 weeks before I hit my last deadline, it was like literally I think it was like 12:30. I was in bed and up at 5 maybe, like some kind of mornings 4:30, and I've heard artists do that before. It's like, yeah, so if they can do it, I can do it. And you get to the end of the deadline, 3 weeks of doing that, and you're like, you feel, oh, that's a tough one. But 2 days later, you wake up and you're like, right, let's go. It's such a weird thing. It's such a kind of, I suppose it's the passion coming out where it's like you would never think that was too much. It's like, I was so happy I got that done. Let's go again. What's the next thing to do? It just kind of keeps on breathing that fire in you, igniting that fire. It's like, yeah, let's keep going. Let's get more work. You know what I mean? It's kind of a strange thing, that obsessive nature of things, you know?
There's, when I was, looking to break into the business, a million years ago, and, I was fortunate to have, great mentors and teachers around, but the model was you need to be able to do a page a day. That was the deal.
Of course.
And you go, okay, that's it. But the thing was, is nobody said that, like, to me, I'm like, okay, great. So, but it didn't say like, oh yeah, that's going to be a 14-hour day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I suppose I looked out in that respect. I always talk about Greg Capullo. People, if you listen to an interview before, they'd be like, "Oh, right, stop talking about Greg Capullo." But like, I suppose I looked out in the respect of his work ethic when I latched on to him early doors. All Greg talked about was working 12 to 16 hours a day, every day of the week. And there's a part of me that like I love, like kind of like militaristic discipline where it's like you just do something and there's no other, there's nothing else outside of anything other than what you're doing. So when I latched onto Greg, it was like that was perfect for me. So that taught me 10 years ago without even understanding the thing about comic books, Alex, understanding that he done that. So he sat at the table 12 to 16 hours every day of the week, right? And like obviously it changes now for him maybe a little bit because he's working for Marvel and it's not an ongoing thing. But I thought, I was like, right, if it takes 12 to 16 hours a day to do a page, it takes 12 to 16 hours. And that's just what it takes, you know what I mean? To do a page a day, that's what it takes, you know? So it was important for me to hear that, to not be shocked breaking into the industry and be like, oh my God, I can't do this. You know what I mean? So kind of trying to keep some sort of quality with the quantity and of work and stuff. That's the challenge, trying to kind of keep kind of understanding where to kind of, I'm still struggling with leaving certain panels alone and just kind of think, right, it's serviceable for the story, move on. I'm still trying to put my heart and soul into every panel because that body of work is nowhere near built up yet. Do you know what I mean? If someone looks at Greg's work, they're not going to pick a panel from Spawn and say, hey, he's terrible because look at that panel. They look at his full body of work and say he's absolutely incredible because of the work he's done, you know?
Yeah.
And there's no panel in Spawn that's terrible from Greg, but let me clear that up. There is no panel in Spawn that's terrible from Greg.
No, Greg, listen, man, I was a huge fan of Greg when I was first in the business because he was doing, I keep forgetting the name of the title, but it was one of the space superheroes from Marvel, like, I don't know, Omega or whatever his name was.
Right.
And Greg was just killing it. It was before he got very sort of super detailed. It was just a very clean, almost Rick Leonardi kind of esque kind of world of drawing. It was beautiful. And I thought he was like a gold standard in 1992. Like, I'm like, this guy's amazing. And then he went away sort of into the mountains and came back with this sort of image look on Spawn, which was just, you know, next level for him. And then he just keeps climbing. But it's rough. I mean, there's this thing, you pull these long hours when you are often an artist who is compelled with detail. There's this desire to put so much into the work because you're internalizing, I need to get all this stuff out. And so and I totally put you in that realm where you're like, I'm going to fill every panel I can possibly fill with something. And it's tough.
It is. It's you know what's funny, Alex? I love comic book art. I adore it, right? It's like, if you look at my studio now, there's a million comic books. It's why we get into the industry, right? But like, I kind of try to learn how to draw from like the golden age of illustrators like Rockwell and all those kind of guys, right? Like, I've talked about before, learning like the famous artist course and stuff and doing that. But I love Alex Toth and Mike Mignola, right? Like, I think everyone essentially pairs it down to those guys, right? Like, but when I broke in early, or when I first started trying to break in early, I tried to understand what they done and how they done it. Like, I have Toth's rules pinned up in my board behind me. Like even kind of pairing down, if you can why use 10 lines when you can use one, right? So I love that. So my kind of, what I'll kind of go into a little bit of depth, I suppose, in my process a little bit. It's like, when I thumbnail something, I'll lay it out like everyone does, right? But then I'll put in my tones, and the shape of the black goes in first, and that has to be like super readable, and then I'll layer in the tones and stuff on top so it doesn't complicate things. But I use a lot of washes, right? When I first see my work in print, it was like, oh, this is tough for me to see, because when you see my inked page, if I put my inked work up, people say, oh, that's super detailed, and detail isn't really what I'm going for. It's more mood and atmosphere and storytelling and structure of the page, right? But the wash, it got washed out with the colors, so it was like, oh my god, excuse me. So I just done a Blood Hunt issue for Marvel, and I kind of leaned into the style that I really wanted to do. It was like, okay, I've been playing with it a little bit. I kind of like to use heavy shadows and stuff, but in this book I use like drop shadows, a bit more complex lighting and stuff. I was like, okay, let's really lean into this and see how it looks under colors. I actually haven't seen that issue colors yet, but I'm never happy with my work, but I was way more, I suppose, satisfied with where the work was looking, because I was like, okay, now I know that will pick up under the colors. So with that detail kind of stuff, it looks detailed and washes, and then when you get it in a comic book, it might not look detailed, and that, like, it broke me heart a little bit, because I was like, it was kind of just an experience of trying to learn on the job, which I'm fortunate enough to do, but it was like trying to adjust a little bit, because that's not how I would want my artwork to look. So it's not just adjusting it for adjusting its sake; it's adjusting it for how I want it to actually look. You know what I mean? So it was kind of trying to figure it out. I don't use a lot of like noodly pen lines. I like to use a brush and big pen of brush strokes and stuff, but kind of put in texture and stuff where I know that maybe colors will pick that up. Then,
Yeah. Well, texture is super important. I probably don't think I ever really employed it as much as I should have.
Right.
But yeah, I hear you on that. It's tough. I mean, I think I used to always talk to my students and say, like a lot of people, when they draw, they'll scribble, they'll scribble like out the thing. And I would always be like, listen, you got to figure out what the line is. Like, what is the line that is telling the thing? Because all the rest of it is just sort of confusion, in your mind. How do you delineate this? And, that can be the underdrawing. That's totally understandable.
Isn't that like art is such a fascinating thing in that respect, where it's like you do those scribbles, right? And everyone always says, like, you lose your you get stiff the more steps you get into something, you know what I mean? So it gets stiffer and stiffer. But somewhere in those scribbles, the perfect line exists. And this is where the geniuses and the masters can see that line, and it's like, oh, I know that's the line there, so they'll take less scribbles to do it. But that's what fascinates me about the pursuit of art and kind of trying to perfect it, which will never be done. You can get people that are close to it for sure, but it's like, I love that what you said. It's like when you do the scribbles, there could be an artist that does 10 of them, but the perfect line is in there. They just can't see it yet. So the more experience, the better you get, the quicker you get to see that line, and the less scribbles you have to put down on paper. That's amazing to me,
Yeah, right. Like, the goal is to get down to like 2 or 3 scribbles. Like, if you can get down to that, you're like...
Even Kim Jong-gi, like, when you see him draw, it's like It's actually, I showed my fiance when he passed a couple of years ago. That was like really kind of heavy on, I kind of think, the whole art industry. It was like everyone felt like they knew him almost because, they were connected in a way that was like, he's so good. Everyone like knows his soul, I showed my fiance and she was like, oh, that's cool. And I was like, no.
No.
And I wasn't letting her
It's
away.
not
I was
just cool.
I was like, sit down. You're not getting away with this. Because usually I'd be like, yeah, thanks, that's cool. Be like, look at what he's doing. Let me explain it to you. It's like, that is insane. That is like God level insanity what he's doing, And then she had another understanding for it. She's like, oh, okay. And I was like, you're still not getting it, but I'll let you away with it.
Right. It's like being able to sit down at a blank piece of paper and draft out a book and not have to go back and edit it. Like it's not his drawings. I would not classify them as perfect, but they were so original and his point of view was locked in. When he was drawing, he saw everything and he was, ostensibly tracing whatever was in his head, which is so
that's like
unfathomable.
Insane. I remember seeing a Bernie Wrightson interview a couple of years ago. He's in his studio. It's a very short interview. He's in his studio talking about Frankenstein. And he says a similar thing. I'm not sure that Bernie kind of worked in the way that Kim did, but he said he kind of has it's almost like a projector and he projects it onto the page. And I was like, thinking to myself, I was like, is that something that you can learn and you can get to, or is that just an innate ability in people that the better they get, they do it? I was like, because I'd love to try to get there. That would make things a lot better and a lot easier.
I had so I was fortunate. I had a really great mentor early on in my comic career, and still is a mentor to this day. And he was really great at trying to help me sort of figure out how to visualize things. And one of his ideas was like, we can all see the story in our head, like what we want the frame to be. And he's like, but move that camera around in your head. Like, put all your pieces in play, move the camera around. And if you need to shove somebody around, move those things around until you find that frame and angle that works best in your head. And that's what you want to go. That's what you're aiming for. There's your goal. But it's very hard once you sort of put the pencil onto the page. It all becomes like kind of muddled. It's very hard to kind of maintain that.
It's almost like when you see someone that's learning to draw and they draw a cool hand, right? And the shoulders out of place. They don't want to rub anything out because, like, but I'll never capture that hand again. But obviously, a proficient artist will just not worry and just capture the hand again. But when you were drawing, did you kind of talking about moving the camera? That's super important to me to understand kind of where I love storytelling. That's kind of why I get into comics mostly. I kind of thought, like, listen, if I can learn storytelling, draftsman skills will catch up, hopefully, if I put enough hours in, you know. Did you kind of labor over, so say you had like a 3/4 down shot, would you kind of think, oh, but if you move the camera down 10%, it would be an even better shot? Or did you kind of just think, oh no, it's a 3/4 down, I'll just stick to that? Or did you kind of move it slightly? Do you know what I'm trying to say? Did you move it ever so slightly to make the shot even more impactful and stuff?
I think that came along probably maybe 5+ years into it, when I had the capability of making that sort of finer movement factor. Earlier on, it is very locked off. You're very straight on. You're very 3/4. The shots weren't as sort of finessed. And then as you kind of moved, you could. So like, you know what? Wait a minute. Let me just shift this angle slightly, and we'll be able to see a little bit more of what we need in the background. This will be helpful for the next panel. But
of course,
it's that vision. The whole goal. The whole goal of being able to create something is to be able to have a vision in your head and then reproduce as close as possible to whatever that inspiration is.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is it's brutal.
Yeah, it is. It's like, it's the, do you know what? It kind of working on comics now, and I've kind of drawn a lot this year and drawn things back to back and stuff, and understanding when you get your own panels is too easy a thing to say, but understanding how to tell the best story, not repeating yourself. There's times where you have to repeat yourself, right? Like, and I mean, like, just like with two heads talking, of course, but like understanding, you can pick a shot and vary the camera angle as you break in. It's like, yeah, you got to have a varied camera angle. That's no problem. That's understandable by anyone. But trying to understand the nuance of why people do things. Like even when I talk about Greg, like he puts a camera anywhere and the room never looks off. Everything is perfectly in perspective, right? But that's the technical aspect of that. I kind of want to break it down to the bones of why did he choose that camera angle? Is there a reason why he's raised it just above the shoulder and not at the level of like the forehead or something? Do you know what I mean? It's those little reasons where it's like, I love the nuances of that sort of stuff, you know, where it's like, that's incredible to me, you know?
So, okay, I say it over and over on this show, and, you know, pardon anybody who is tired of hearing this, but there is a series, YouTube series called Every Frame a Painting.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah. And I try to watch it every year just because they're not long, and go through, because the intentionality that they discuss in those, you know, 7-minute videos is, it's so helpful to be able to help me conceptualize. Absolutely.
It's like there's actually one of those I'm gonna forget the name of the film. It's the samurai film they break down. I can't remember the name of the film, but he talks about movement in a panel, right, Alex? And it's like, oh my god, it's what I've kind of understood and learned to do a little bit more. So like comics are static. Like it's a static medium, right? You want to try convey motion and movement, and even in my covers and stuff, I'll have little things like papers flying around in the air, or snow, or a cape billowing, or something like that. And it's like that literally that little video taught me that. It was like, oh, do you know what? Like, just because you're static doesn't have to be static. Something can be moving. It could be a bird flying. There can be atmosphere. There can be, you can separate things by having smoke in the foreground or the middle ground or the background. Do you know what I mean? All these little things that make something feel more immersive and more in depth. It's like those things fascinate me, where it's like, oh, that's like Stuart Immonen is a master, I think, of having movement in a panel and kind of showing smoke and leading the eye that way, you know, kind of framing a head behind a smoke, billowing smoke cloud or something. It's like, oh, he's not just doing that for flair. There's reasons behind everything, and that's what I love, where it's like, if you talk to an artist, hey, why'd you do that? This is the reason I done that. It's not just because it looks cool. Sometimes it can just look cool because it's comics and it's amazing, but it's like a lot of the time there's a reason behind doing it, you know?
Oh, totally. And I think it's like that what you're talking about to me is atmosphere. You know, the idea is like, how do you like, why you know, for years I'm like, why is it always smoky in like a living room in a Steven Spielberg movie? Like, it's because he's creating atmosphere so you can feel the air. Like, and you know, talk about the person who puts the most floating papers in the you know, in the frame. Exactly. That guy does it.
Yeah, that's sorry, go ahead. I just cut you off. Sorry.
No. It absolutely makes you, the viewer, become a part of the space.
Of course it does. Yeah, that is the most important thing to me in my kind of artwork, as in, obviously I love drawing characters and backgrounds and all the kind of stuff that people will pick out. Oh, that's detail, this and that. Sometimes the intangible thing is atmosphere, and that's what I adore trying to capture. Like, even in covers and stuff, it's like, if someone says to me, like, the biggest compliment I could get is, so my New Orleans issues, kind of some of the compliments I would have got was, it feels like New Orleans and it feels like I'm there. And it's like, that to me is perfect. Like when I draw a graveyard and someone says, oh, that feels spooky. Like, I love like slasher films, right? But I don't love slasher films because of slasher films. I love them like the original Halloween, because you feel in that film, you feel the atmosphere, the leaves on the ground, you feel like it's autumn or fall where you are, you know. I was like, oh my god, if I can try capture any sort of that in my pages, like I just done in the Blood Hunt issue, it's set in Tucson in a desert and stuff. It's like, you're trying to just capture the feeling of the desert. What makes something indigenous to that area? Can you capture it? Can you make it feel like it's supposed to feel, you know?
Yeah, and that sort of thinking is very Toth in my mind. Like, how do you bring the viewer into this by making sure you have the actual stuff in there versus the, you know, the fakery of the stuff, so people go, oh well, I guess you're in the desert, you know. Like, and I feel and it's really interesting you bring up the New Orleans thing, because you shared one of those New Orleans stories with me, and I felt like page 10 through 15, like of the issue you sent me, I'm like, this is like, you were dead on in that space. Like, those pages, just, you were flowing with what amazing. The storytelling and the environment. I'm like, this is working so well. So it's interesting how you said that, and I've got the same response.
I'm glad you think so, Alex. Thanks. That's a big compliment. Thanks a million. It's even
Yeah.
going back to Tote and stuff. It's like you all remember his critiques on Steve Rude's pages. I think everyone knows them, right? Where he talks about the camera tripod, and he's like, "That's not that." It's like Jesus, like down to the bare bones of that. It's like you got to be so precise, and
accurate.
that goes back to Capullo as well. He says he doesn't like drawing backgrounds. Well, not that he doesn't like it, it's not the flashy stuff. He said, but you got to put as much love into that as you do with the main character, as you do the teacup on the table, as you do someone's shoe or shoelace. It's like, that's what I love, is those little nuanced things. Actually, in issue 9, me and Philip were chatting, and Philip, his scripts are like dense with details and stuff, which I love. I always say to Philip, give me as much detail as you can, and then I can kind of decipher where to go with that. You know, I'll try to do my best to put everything in, but I'll decipher it as best I can. And in the antique shop, in the 9th issue of the Hulk, there's a little jar of Civil War bullets, and Philip loves this sort of stuff. He didn't mention those bullets, but through his script and gathering the memorabilia that he had in the antique shop, I was like, oh, do you know what? I'll reference that. I'll research that, see what the bullets look like, put them in a jar. And he was like, out of the whole issue, right, 20 pages, you think there's some cool stuff in there? And he was like, I fucking love those Civil War jar bullets. Yeah. And I was like, that is so, it's like, I love it because it means someone's looking at your work, but it's like, it's the coolest thing for me that like a splash page is cool, but those little details, I was like, that's why me and Philip work, I think, well together myself anyway. It's like we work well because he loves that sort of stuff, as do I, you know?
Yeah. Well, if you want to get a great example of masterful storytelling in an environment, I would highly recommend you picking up the first 12 issues of The Nam by Michael Golden.
Michael Golden, they are some of like my favorite comics, Alex. Yeah, they're amazing. Yeah.
And then if you could, then this is going to be a little harder for you, I'm sure, in Ireland to find these. But if you go previous to that, he did 2 or 3 issues of this anthology magazine comic book called Savage Tales for Marvel. And this is where he and Doug first came up with the idea for the Nam, and they did like 2 or 3 stories in there. And this was all, so they co-wrote this together, and Michael did all the artwork. So it's his penciling and inking. It's just pure him. And there's a shot, there's a sequence in a page, I think it might be even 2 pages, where he sets the establishing shot, and then he works through all the characters while the story is kind of, narrating. And every single background is the exact, like the characters in the background are the ones that are established in the establishing shot. The backgrounds are all correct. It is such a masterful way of moving a reader through a scene.
Wow, I'm gonna pick that up. Definitely, I can't wait for that now. That's amazing.
I'll see if I can find the numbers, and I'll send you.
Please do. Speaking of Michael Golden, like that's, I mean, his Batman covers are some of my favorite Batman covers ever. It's like in my covers, I've kind of like I don't go for kind of like there's people out there that do like splashy covers that are unbelievable. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like get them 2 splashy covers. Like they're phenomenal. I love to work in any sort of story I can in a cover if I can. So there's a background in it, there's a character in it. There's a couple that I have, like just done a Darth Maul cover, and he's just kind of standing there. That was what the editor asked for. But I try to work a little bit of story in the bottom right and stuff. But Michael Golden's covers really inspired me when I seen him. I was like, oh my god, like the one where Batman's flying down through the staircase and it's like he's in the middle. It's like, oh my god, and seeing when he's flying down through Gotham and like the buildings are in the background, you can just, it's a story in itself.
It's the best. So that's is that what this is? Yeah, I mean, these are all his issues in here.
I was gonna say you're gonna pull them out. That's amazing.
And then all the black and I've got tons of the black and white stuff as well.
Wow.
So he was the mentor I was speaking about earlier. So
no way.
Wow. So I was relatively reverential to begin with. So I took every word he said as sort of
gospel. I mean, that's it. Yeah. That's not going to steer you wrong, though, is it? Taking that? I didn't know that. Yeah. That's incredible. My God, wow.
Yeah. Fortunate to say the least.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Yeah, I mean, he's influenced. I mean, how many artists has he influenced over the years? But like, jeez.
I mean, I guess next to Kirby and Toth and now Mike Mignola, I think he's right up there with the. He's just not as well known.
Yeah,
You know?
that's it. And the other names you named, it's like you have these people that are like how can you even explain? You know, you have like amazing artists and great artists, but then there's artists who just separate themselves, and it's like they're on this different platform. It's like they kind of become even Mignola as well. It's like I almost don't even consider Mignola a human, if that makes sense. I know that sounds a bit airy fairy, but it's like he's just this like weird kind of god. He's almost like he's one of his own characters, just floats out in the ether. It's just like he's above everyone. It's like I just do this so well. It's like I don't even know, like I'm not even a human. You know, it's like seeing these. I talk about these kind of people. Like I can never even speak to these people in real life because like. Coming from football, it's like I had an understanding like of you get to a certain place, there's certain ability into account, but like art is so much different. It's so much more of your soul on a page. Although it's like, and I'm kind of two ways on this because I think comics are comics and they should be fun, and there's superheroes in tights and they're fighting and that's amazing. But I also have the very serious side of me that's like I take comics so seriously it's not even funny. Like someone talk to me about it, it's like they'd be like, all right, relax, it's only comics. I'm like, no, but it's not. It's everything. I'd be like, it's everything in the world and that's all that matters. So like I'm kind of both of those fences. I want to have so much fun with it because that's why I get into comic books, but I also take it so seriously. So when I see these kind of characters like Michael Golden that you talk about, these artists, it's like, oh man, like to understand what I always kind of think is to understand the knowledge. Imagine having his knowledge. It's like it's such a, and to try strive for that is what we're all doing. But I just think, oh, imagine just sitting in his head or body for one day and wondering what that feels like. Just looking down at people and be like, oh, there's those peasants over there.
I think about it, and I think like, you know, we saw examples of that with Toth, you know, in anything he wrote. You know, there's a level of frustration that he expressed. And I think that frustration, this is me guessing, and I'm not, you know, obviously I don't have a proof of this, but I would look at it as, why don't you get this? And this is the genius aside factor. And I really do think that there are, like I always say, genius aside is because I can't explain it. I can look at artwork and I can break down 95% of the artwork I see, you know, that's done and go, okay, I can figure out how they did this. And then there's this small infantile percentage of people who I go, I don't know how you did this because my brain doesn't operate in this fashion. And I think for people like Toth, they go, how come you just can't see this as a simple black and white solution? Why are you messing this up? Why can't you just remember what a B-17 looks like and recreate it on a page at the angle you need?
Of
you know,
course.
and I think that, you know, people like that, people like Michael fall into that category. I think visualists like Kirby are different. Kirby and Mignola, I think, are in a different category because they create a style and a feel with their work that comes from another unique, you know, originality place, but it's not done with a craft that is like, how do we do this? Like, you know, you know, you take, you know, I was just thinking earlier today, I'm like, if you take Mike Mignola out of like the existence of mankind, I go, what does modern comic books look like right now? Because
very true.
between, you know, Mignola and Bruce Timm, like that's a huge chunk of what comic books look like right now.
Absolutely, yeah. That's fascinating hearing artists like yourself talk about that sort of stuff. Like, do you know when you're saying there, there's most 95% of art you will look at and you think, oh, I can break that down, you know what to do. And so with the 5%, I know you kind of just broke it down a little bit there, but is it, so say when you look at Toth, right, say like from a technical standpoint rather than a feeling standpoint, is it that you're looking at that thinking, obviously his technical draftsmanship is like mastery level, right? But is it you're thinking that he chooses the right line? Are you like, so what you're not understanding in that aspect is how he chooses the right thing every single time? Is that what you're kind of thinking?
Yeah, and I think for Toth, it's three things that I look at. I look at, and this is shared also. The first category, certainly with Golden, is that there's a layering of information that happens, and the layering of the, you know, the close, mid, and background all support one another. So the focus element is going to be isolated and highlighted by the environment around it. Like they're capable of thinking and solving that problem before it's inked and go, okay, here's how I need to make sure
Okay.
that the viewer knows exactly what I'm supposed to be
Yeah.
looking at.
Okay.
And then with Toth, it comes down also to his I guess, and then maybe it's a combination of both, but the camera angle, like how he chooses to place the camera to make the overall composition work best. And then that line that you pulled out, like his ability to distill everything down to this line, which isn't complicated in observation, but in execution, it's impossible.
Impossible. And do you think that is, relatively speaking, not necessarily to his level, achievable through hard work and learning and teaching?
Oh, for the mere mortal?
Yeah, for the mere mortal, exactly.
Yeah.
For some, do you think, like, and I don't mean to his level, Alex, you know what I mean? I know he is, like, obviously, like I said, like, he is a god like Mignola, but to a relative closeness to where someone, could get, not even rub shoulders, I just mean close enough to where you think, oh, that guy maybe might mirror that,
I think, I think the lessons can be learned. I think all that knowledge and because all we have is observation. We have no primary source. There is no Alex Toth. There's no videotapes of Alex Toth drawing.
Yeah.
We don't have him sitting at conventions doing sketches and us figuring out what he's doing.
Of course.
So all we have to do is to be forensic pathologists and kind of look at the work and go, how did he get here? But yeah, it is. I think all of it's achievable. And like, if you think of like John Paul Leon, like John Paul took all of what Toth did as far as structure and composition, but he didn't emulate line. Like JP's line was JP's line.
Was his own line. His real bold, strong, like confident line. Like talking about, like, it's hard to distill top 3 artists for me, but at the top of any list is John Paul Leon for me. Like, he is like I did Wintermen artist edition. It's like, it's come away from its binding. Like, I'm almost have to get me like my second edition. Like, he is just, for everything to do with him, it's like exactly like what you talk about. So that's interesting because I think, coming from a football background as well, right? I was under the illusion, and I kind of still am a little bit, Alex. It's a weird. I'm not, and again, I'm separating Toth, Mignola, say Golden as well, right? Those kind of incredible artists, to say they have like this intrinsic talent in them, or skill, whatever you want to call it. But when I was a footballer, you can only get so far. So as a footballer, right, this is why I love artwork, because I'm 5'10", well, I'm 5'9", but I always give myself an extra inch, right? But as a footballer, so I can play against someone that's 6'3", who's faster than me and stronger than me, and there is sometimes just nothing I can do, right? And it's an innate ability that someone else might have. So take Messi, for example. My little nephew watches football, and I showed him a clip today. It is the most innocuous clip ever. It's a ball comes over, Messi takes a touch in the air, and as he's taking the touch, he's already moving forward, and the ball is set in play. As he's moving, he's controlling it. It doesn't look like anything to anybody, and those little things are what separate him, because he naturally does these things. But to an extent, you can work really hard to get to a decent level, and that's what I thought with artwork. Like, I'm not a naturally gifted or good artist, or footballer for that matter, Alex, but trying to work, what fascinates me about artwork is, I kind of had it in my own head, I can get as good, well, I will be as good as I want to be, or as much as I will be, because I'll put in the effort. Sometimes in football, what I'm trying to say is, you can't help circumstance. Your teammates are bad, you're bad, it is what it is. But in artwork, when I die, my last piece of art will be, that's how many hours you put into getting good at art. And there's no excuse. Right. It's like, it's almost as, it couldn't be any more raw. It like shows your soul. It's like, you worked hard or you didn't work hard, and you achieved what your potential was or you didn't. So kind of understanding, asking you that question, can you think someone can get to this level of thought? That's what you're always striving for. But that's why it's interesting to hear you kind of say, like, these guys are just, there's something else innately in them, as well as being unbelievably hardworking, that they have just in them, you know?
Well, you can make the list, you said Messi. I mean, you could put Michael Jordan, you could put Wayne Gretzky down, and these people who had, like, Messi's doing what Gretzky, verbalized. Like, I don't skate to where I want the puck to go. I'm skating to where the puck is going to be.
Exactly.
Like, that's because I'm going to be there when that I need to be there to do the thing that I need to do. And I think these are things that are I don't know if these are coachable things, because I don't know if if you either have something in you that says, I'm going to do this, grit is not coachable. Grit is a thing that you
Yes.
either, it's not that you have it or you don't have it. You have to develop it. You have to work at it.
Of
And
course.
grit takes grit. It takes
Yeah.
grit to have grit.
Definitely, it comes through life, doesn't it? Like hardships in life. That's what that comes from. And you meet people with more of it early on, and someone that has less of it. You know what I mean? I do think kind of like easier lives tend to not having as much of it, and that's a bit of a broad statement, but I agree with that sort of stuff. There's certain things innately as a footballer. When I went up to at Villa, I was 16 and I trained with the first team, and Gareth Barry, who was like he has the most appearances in the Premiership ever. Right? People wouldn't consider him this amazing footballer. And I wouldn't have until I went up and trained with him. And it is to explain to people watch football on the telly and everything. Now football is a little bit different because they're all kind of athletes in similar size and shape. And there's not many kind of quote unquote ballers anymore, like street footballers, But seeing Gareth Barry, Alex, it's hard to explain how good these people are up close. It's like time slows down. I'm telling you, Messi, there's no way me and Messi see the same things on a football pitch. Like he sees things either happening before it happens, or time slows down. Like even if it's only a fraction of a second that it slows down, there is no way that we are the same. You know what I mean? Like there's something innately in him that makes him better. And I went up to the first team in Villa. I was like, listen, hard work. I've got good technical ability. I can play. And then you come up against someone like Gareth Barry, and it's not even in the same stratosphere. It's like if you get close to him, he plays one touch. If he has space, he plays around you. But that's almost too simple. It's the understanding of the game before the ball even comes to you. He's like, okay, I know he's going to be here. It's almost like, how many steps is he reading ahead of me? He knows I'm going to go there. So he steps here. He knows if I go here. It's like, oh my God. And to understand that at such a high level, to play. And then on top of that, your touch has to be good. It's like, oh my God, when you break it all down, the kind of complex nature of someone that is a master is fascinating to me, and it always has been,
And, you sort of dialed out two things in this. Like the one thing is this time slowing down thing that, you're wondering if Messi thinks are slower.
Yeah.
And, you hear about these people who are, phenoms in a category. So a Messi, but you also hear them being, maybe hard to play with, and hard on their teammates. But I think it goes back to that Toth thing. He's like, why can't you see this? It's right there. All this stuff is here. Just pay attention.
Just do it.
And I think that just do it. And I think for a person like Messi or Michael Jordan, they see this stuff, and unfortunately, the rest of us don't see it the way they see it, and it's rough.
Do you follow football? Do you watch football yourself, Alex? Do you like soccer?
I haven't watched. I wish I watched it as much as I used to. I kind of stopped maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I wish I watched more.
Have you heard of a player called Roy Keane? He's like Ireland's most famous player.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Like, so he was a manager, and a famous story of him being a manager is it kind of boils it down to being as simple as this. He's managing Sunderland, and he's getting frustrated, more frustrated. And it's the simple thing is he's looking at these players thinking, I'm telling you to pass the ball from A to fucking B. Why can't you do it? And they're like, right, I'm not you. You know what I mean? I'm fighting for relegation here in the Premiership. It's easy for you to see that, but I cannot see what you're telling me to do. So he's getting frustrated because he's thinking, why aren't they doing what I'm telling them to do? But it's the technical aspect of, I can't do it. I'm not physically able because I don't have your ability. So I can understand, like you said, that total frustration. It's like, what do you do? Just be better. It's like almost that thing where it's just like, just do better. I don't know why you can't do better,
just don't suck.
Yeah, well, exactly.
And I think it just comes down to intangibles. Like, I mean, you can't there are the things that are intangibles. You can coach, you can get fitter. You can improve your figure drawing skills. You can improve your perspective skills. You can do all these things. You can learn how to spot blacks better. You can do all these things. But the intangibles are the difference between what make someone Mike Mignola or somebody Alex Toth or whomever we call Capullo's putting those hours in. He's not, he's grinding it and making those hours count and putting it on the page. And that's why he's a top 10 name in the business.
And I seen an interview a while ago. Todd McFarlane had visited Greg's house to do a little. It was for Spawn 300, and they were doing this like kind of promo thing. I think it was for Sci-Fi Wire. I think it was, and he sat down and he said, "It doesn't come easily for Greg. He puts in those hours because he has." Now I'm sure, like in the grand scheme of it doesn't come easy, I'm talking about like Greg is obviously amazing. He's better than most artists in it, right? But like he says, he works hard 16 hours because he has to. So it's still, he's like you said there, he's almost like blue collar. He's putting in his hours because it doesn't come as easy as it might for someone else. But that's why he puts the hours in to do that, like, you know. So that fascinated me. I was like, oh, even after all these years, I wouldn't say probably drawing is a struggle for him, but he still probably has to put those hours in to get the best out of his work that he does, you know. That fascinates me.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, thank you, YouTube, for sending me down a rabbit hole. But for some reason, I saw some video of a Thai Muay Thai fighter, and just this amazing sort of compilation of all his sort of his rise to fame. I'm like, this is insane, and very, very cool. And then, of course, it's throwing everything at the world at me. Like, you want to see this, and there's like, I don't know who these guys are, but there's two brothers named last name Paul, like a Logan Paul and a something or other Paul.
Right.
Yeah. Like, I don't know what they do. I don't know who they are, but they like to get in fights apparently. But anyway, I see this video of like maybe Logan or the other brother, Paul, fighting. I'm going to call him Bob Paul. Bob is fighting this.
I think it's Logan and Jake. Let me say that. That's all I know about them, but I know the name's Logan and Jake.
Okay, Jake, not Bob.
So
he's fighting this Brazilian, MMA jiu-jitsu, guy. And I'm like, oh, I know who that guy is. And then they like throw up the cards and it's like, whatever Paul kid, 25 years old, other guy, 47. And I'm like,
yeah,
and I'm like, okay.
Now that you say that was Anderson Silva, wasn't it? He was fighting. Was it Anderson Silva?
Yeah, Anderson. Yes,
that's right. Yeah. I remember that actually. Now that you say that, that's gas.
The reason I go on this tangent is, Greg Capullo is Anderson Silva. He's putting those 16 hours in, those 14 hours in, because he needs to stay strong.
Yes.
If he's like, could he do a page in 6 to 8 hours? Absolutely. And would people still buy that? Absolutely. But to be content with what he does, and this is me speaking for Greg. So Greg, if you disagree with me, let's have it. But he's doing it so he can stay strong. He can stay focused. And that hunger is what, so, Messi doesn't have the same step he had 10 years ago. Not possible. The legs are the first to go. Yeah. Like it's just how it is. But all upstairs, it's there. It's just the body doesn't sort of, and he could still whoop our butt on the pitch.
Definitely.
But unless it's one of the Paul brothers, then they could beat him up.
No, but I agree with you, Alex. It's so funny. Do you know what as well? It's kind of one of those things where, like, say, in comics, it's a deadline-driven business, right? Like, it's like you're a commercial artist, right? And, like, that's it's all I ever wanted to do was, like, I sat in this room for 10 years and no one looking at my artwork. Now I get paid and people want to look at it. It's like, it boggles my mind. It's like, I'm fascinated by it. So it's like, I can't be more grateful, right? But then at some stage, it becomes my purpose, where it's like, I draw so much, right? And I have done even before I broke in, like you, like everyone has. Like, you draw so much before you break in, you kind of feel like not experienced enough, but like you think, oh yeah, I've drawn so much. If I don't create, I feel like I'm missing something. I know that sounds, I kind of tend to look at art as kind of, like I said, very militaristic, and like you got to chain yourself to the desk and the deadline doesn't wait, you got to just do it. But there's a little bit of kind of like, no, this is my purpose. Like I kind of had, and I don't go in for like faith and stuff. I don't. But like at some stage, the more art I create, if I don't create art, it's like, oh, I feel a little bit like empty. So like, if you, and again, I'm not ever speaking for Greg, but he might have that. He's like, no, this feels like my purpose. But my whole life, I like creating. When I create, I feel kind of invigorated. So I think it can be that as well. Sometimes it's like, yeah, this is what I do. This is my identity was never a footballer, and my identity's never been an artist. But I love them both, and I do attach some sort of pride and passion and purpose to them. Do you know what I mean? That's kind of like I like to set goals and think, yeah, I want to strive and like an absolute bullet train to where I want to go to, and only me, I hopefully can get me way. That sounds arrogant. I don't mean that. Obviously, artwork and there's better artists than me. I just mean like how much can you work humanly possible to get as good as you can for as long as you can. You know?
Yeah, yeah, and it takes hard work, and it doesn't matter whether it's drawing comics or coloring comics or writing comics or
Yeah.
or playing an instrument or whatever. I mean, if you want to do it at a level where people will put money down to support the thing you do, you have to put all that time in. There's just there's no shortcut for it. I mean, I would venture that Mignola probably puts more time into a page now than he did before, because he knows what he's done before, and he knows how he has to try to always push to be the next thing to make it better than the last.
Absolutely, yeah. That's kind of like it's similar to football. You're only as good as your last game. They say, it's like in art. It's like it's a funny one for me now. Like, so I'm obviously nowhere near as experienced as you, but it's like I don't even look at comps when they come in. It's like it's so far in the rearview mirror. It's like I don't even kind of almost remember doing it. I kind of what I've always wanted and what I kind of always said was like kept it to myself, obviously, because it sounds a bit pretentious, but like legacy over likes, right? Like social media and stuff. I understand there's a marketing thing towards comic books. You have to play the game a little bit, right? And that's what I mean. You've got in contact, which is amazing, right? Like that's kind of what you find people on there and you build connections. And I genuinely, hand on my heart, have built amazing connections on social media. So I do love it for that. But likes and stuff, I couldn't care less about. I don't strive for that. It's like it's the legacy thing. I mean, I don't mean like I'm going to leave this Mike Mignola legacy, but I just want to have my name on the spine of books. Like in 10 years' time, I want to have this amount of books with my name on it and say, that is the work I put in. Do you know what I mean? Because social media could be gone in the morning. It's such a fleeting thing. Who cares about it? So it's like trying to build that legacy of books and work and think, oh, I left this behind. Whether anyone cares about it, at least I done as much as I could as in that amount of time that I was able to do it.
Oh, for sure. No, and I think and you said something really important, and it's sort of touched to a dark subject right now, but the idea of the identity and linking it to the thing that you do, I think that's a really dangerous path. And I don't know if you had coaching while you were growing up, playing football, but it's really a dangerous route where if you identify yourself with what you do, especially in a creative capacity, all you set yourself up to be is a victim of popularity at that point, and that's a really dangerous place.
Definitely, yeah. I through football, I didn't have coaching, Alex, but through football, I'd seen friends and stuff retire and crumble in a year, 6 months, crumbled. Their life fell off the trails. They were alcoholics, gamblers, because their whole life since they were 5 years of age, they were Danny the footballer. The next 2 words after Danny was the footballer. It was always Danny. That could have been my identity, but I never strived for that. It was like I play football, but I kind of was, I suppose, secure myself enough where it was like if it didn't work, I didn't care. It was like I'm not playing football for anybody else. I don't need this popularity contest. I suppose with I rinsed my football career, Alex. I gave it everything I could. My dream was to play in the Premiership, and I never done it. So I kind of don't feel successful in my football career, although I achieved a decent amount. But I done everything in my power possible to do that. So I don't have any regrets in that respect. It's not as if I was like, I could have done this better, done that better. So that's where it wasn't the identity thing where I was trying to hold on to it and think, oh, I have to keep going. And then luckily enough, I found another passion in comic books where it was like, again, it's everything in my life. It's genuinely everything, including my fiance, my family. But like, I am so unbelievably passionate about comics, but art is not my identity. Do you know what I mean? It's like I'm a human. It's like it's that thing where like it's all I ever think about, and I'm obsessed with it. But I'm not. It's not my identity. Do you know what I mean? It's like I am not what I do. Do you know what I mean? That's kind of and football taught me that. That was a tough one to learn. Like I seen some good mates go down some bad roads. To learn that was a real tough lesson. You know what I mean? I learned it the hard way through kind of some of the things I seen them do.
Yeah, I do know, and I mean, I caution everybody who makes a thing to try to remove that from being who they are, because enjoy the thing that you do it to the absolute best of your ability and strive for improvement, but do not like leave it on the field. Like, okay, done.
And I played with some footballers that were unbelievable and they were arseholes, but it was like, but they're not beholden to be it's a weird place to be as a footballer because you're put in this position that you're supposed to be a role model. Sorry for cursing my I said, I should have said
no,
swear
away.
Okay.
Swear away.
But they're put in this position where they're told to be a role model. They weren't. I understand what football is, but they didn't choose that role, right? So like it's tough to put that on someone at a young age, you know? So now, like, even with artwork and comics and whatever's happened in the past, I'm not talking about anyone specifically in particular, but, like, whatever they do, I understand there's a moral kind of code and all these things. Like, with anything that anyone does, footballers included, but, like, you got to separate the footballer or the comic book artist from something they can do. Like, I can see the art and just separate the person. I don't really need to know the person, Alex. You know what I mean? Before social media, there was really no faces to stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, there was no faces as a footballer there was, but like as comic books, my favorite comics are the Beanos and the Dandies growing up. Who drew them? I couldn't tell you. Even to this day, I don't know. Do you know what I mean? So I was like, I just like the artwork. Yeah. So you got to kind of, like you said, and that goes for yourself as well. I think separating your art from yourself. Do you know what I mean? It's super important.
Mm-hmm. So I was thinking about this before we were talking, and how you've visualized and placed yourself into two elite professions in your life, which is it's rarefied to be able to do that. And, you know, I mean, while the public, or I should say more of the public, will idolize your football career in that sense, the comic book career is even a far more hard. It's a far harder group to get into. It's the numbers of people who are doing this on a paid level is of not that big. And, you know, the money is not like it is in football, but let's, you know,
in my career it was.
Okay, sure. Right. No, it's true. I get that. But it's hard to visualize yourself in a thing that everyone else around you looks at and says, well, that's just a dream.
Yeah.
Like, that's fantasy to do that thing. And, you know, and I could see, like, listen, if you're growing up in Ireland, it's a lot easier to visualize a football thing than a comic book thing, because everyone's running around with a football,
absolutely,
versus running around with the comic books. Or there's nobody down the street doing comic books, or nobody who was a comic book artist in the 80s at the pub.
Yeah,
you know, like
absolutely.
So I can see your path to becoming a footballer with skill sets as a child, encouragement, you know, and then the path goes on through grit and determination and advancement. But for the comic book thing, like, that's a love and a passion that you discovered somehow on the way of the subject, and then of the actual doing of it. Those are two very different things. Like, for you, like, how did you, like, I mean, was this something you were like, well, hey, if this doesn't work out, you know, here, were you midfielder or defender? What were you?
Midfielder.
Yeah. So like, as a midfielder, you know, like, I could probably maybe make it in the arts. Like, I mean, did you have this in your mind, or was it sort of, okay,
no,
now
what? Yeah, it's actually, like, when I look back at it, it's mad, Alex. It's like the two worlds could not be more different. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's so insane. But growing up in Ireland as a young lad, generally speaking, most kids want to be footballers, right? So it's like, that's like I say, most kids. It's changed a little bit now, but back then it was like you would have given your right arm to be a footballer. So that was everyone's dream. So I was fortunate enough to make that happen, you know. And then it's so weird when I look back now. It's like, coming then to be a comic book artist, I set my sights on this almost 10 years ago when I was 20, just turned 25, and I was like, right, I want to be a comic book artist. Let's figure out how to do this. So the best thing that ever happened to me was Will Sliney. He drew Spider-Man 2099 for years for Marvel. He lived down in Cork, and through lucky circumstance, his cousin was best friends with my brother. We ended up connecting, and Will kind of told me, hey, I draw comics in Ballycotton for Marvel. That's in Cork. And I'm like, Jesus. So that was like, the original spark of that was like, oh, you don't have to move to New York. You can do this at home. So that set something tangible in place where it's like, you can do this. Will lives in Cork. What could stop me doing it? But in my life, I've always kind of had the thing, Alex, where Ireland's a very kind of small country. It's an amazing country. People kind of have this thing sometimes where it's like, I do well for where I come from. I'm like, I don't care where I come from. I could be in New York or from Dublin or from Wicklow. It doesn't matter. We're still competing for the same jobs. And nowadays, it's that same way, you know. But I remember I came home from playing football and I had saved up money I was like, right, I'm going to work on artwork. And I didn't make a lot of money at all over there, Alex, to be fair, like playing football. It was like, long story short, I'd done well and then dropped down some levels and all things happened in between. I didn't have a ton, but I was like, right, I'm going to give myself a certain amount of time to try break in. And I said to my family, and they, like you said, they were like, what kind of, not that they didn't believe it, what kind of far off dream is this? And I kind of said it to myself in my own head. I was like, the path that I have planned, like anyone broke into comics knows, I was like, no one will understand it until it happens. I can't try sit down and explain this to me ma and dad. Now listen, at this stage I was also 28, so I didn't need to explain anything to ma and dad. Like, I'm my own man, right? It was like trying to figure things out. But like, I was like, no one will understand this path until it happens, because my brother would always come, he'd be like my best mate as well. He'd say, hey, why don't you get a job in an animation company like the Cartoon Saloon who won Oscars? I was like, go over there, get a job over there. And I was like, you're not understanding what I'm trying to do, but that's okay. I don't expect you to understand it, but when it happens, you will. You know what I mean? So then, when things kind of, I just literally work like I had a job, Alex. It was like for 3 years. I remember sitting in my loft and I would just work. I'd get up at 8 o'clock in the morning and go to bed at 2 o'clock, and that was pretty much for, I want to say 3.5 years since I moved home from America. And it was kind of just, I had a job then in a gym with my sister, and I just kind of kept the lights on doing that, you know. And then, luckily enough, I'd bumped into Gail, and Gail was amazing. She tweeted everything out and things have took off from there. But since then, my whole family were like, excuse me, oh, now I understand. Do you know what I mean? So it was like trying to keep that foolhardiness about me, where it's like, just keep going, keep battling. But I always kind of believed it. If coming from football, if I worked hard enough, I wasn't delusional in the respect that I wasn't working hard at art. I was working every single day as hard as I could, because I knew how intense and how competitive art and comic books is, you know. So it was like I was tangibly trying to achieve this goal, not just kind of having these airy fairy thoughts, you know. So yeah, but when that happened, it was like everyone understood, like, oh, okay, now I understand. But then when I went to Comic-Con last year in New York, Alex, it was like, oh my god, it's like that. It made it hit home to me, where it was like, I know how competitive comic books are. That's why I wake up and I go to bed the hours I do, because I want to stay in this industry, and I know everyone is just kicking the door down waiting to take your job, you know. So I quite like that as well, because it's like, I don't necessarily need external motivation, but that keeps a fire burning. It's like, yeah, let's go, let's get to work, you know. So when I went to New York, that was my fiance came over, and it was actually amazing. It was kind of a not full circle, because I've only been working a year, but I tabled beside Greg Capullo for comic sketch art over there, and it was like, and she knows much I talked about Greg. She almost knew him at that stage, because I never shut up about him. She was like, oh, look, there's Greg. But underneath that roof of Comic-Con in New York, it's like, oh my god, every artist that works in comic books is in this room. As a footballer in England, you have 4 leagues. In Spain, there's 4 leagues. In America, there's 4 leagues. There's so many avenues as a footballer to be a footballer, but to be a comic book artist, every artist is under that roof. And I was like, oh my god, this is the most competitive industry ever. And I knew how lucky I was to break in, and I've never left. That's never left me. I wake up every morning and I almost like jolt to the bed. I'm like, Jesus, I gotta get to work. It's like, I know how lucky I am, you know what I mean? So it's like, I had such fortune by meeting Gail and her being so kind to me and tweeting out all my work and stuff. And then from there, I've just tried to kind of keep it going as best I can, you know?
Yeah. It's great to remember the elements that, and the people who sort of like passed the fire on to you, you know? And so that's what she did. She like, like, here's some of the fire, now move forward and see what you can do with it.
Yeah. And it's important. I am forever trying to like people are almost bored of me now saying, all right, like, stop bringing my name up. You don't have to thank me. It's like, I just want to say thanks. So like, because you don't get it. I'm self-taught, but I'm not self-taught. I went to Lieber Mayho, James Harron, Will Sliney for advice on any pages. Like, so when you say self-taught, it's a real broad statement. Like, these people gave me their time and they were generous enough to look at my work and help me along the way without even knowing me, you know. But when Gail come along, it was just like, and also I feel there's a bit of responsibility there, Alex, when Gail does something so nice and when Will puts so much time into me, there's a real responsibility for me to make sure I do good work on their name, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Coming from football, I kind of put my name out for some people and they let me down a little bit. So it's like, I'm not having someone back my name and then me kind of floating off 2 years later and be like, I don't like comics. Like, no, like, it's super important for me to stamp everything down and say like, hey, the name that they said, he worked out all right. You know what I mean? At least he's working still anyway. You know what I mean?
Right. He's still here.
He's still here. He's hanging on.
So what is it? I mean, because it's a huge mindset change at 25 to redefine your goals?
Yeah.
Like, what was like? Was there a comic book? Was there just this moment and you're like, you hit this aha moment, or what? How did it evolve?
Do you know, there's two kind of aspects to that. When I was 25, I realised I wasn't going to play in a Premiership, Alex. I had to take a long hard look at myself, because at that age, you're 23, 24, I was out going on trials to England. You think there's always a little bit of hope. At 25, I signed a new contract for a club in America, and I was like, this is it now. It's not, I'm staying in America, and I won't make it where I wanted to make it. So from there, you say, right, I'll have to work, and I wanted to work anyway. I don't like not getting up and doing this, but like, I have to work and figure out something to do after football. That was the biggest thing, where it's like, right, what can I do? And I always was kind of decent at drawing. When I say that, like, I'd always doodle and thought, oh yeah, I'll be a children's book artist or something. Then I came across Hush, and it was like, I'd read comics before that, and I loved all the films. I remember watching Sam Raimi's Spider-Man in my own living room, and I was like, oh my God, there was something that lit in me, and that was like, oh, I had this romantic view of like Spider-Man being in New York and Jack Kirby being in New York, and they're all drawn. Like, I mean, it's just something so, because Stan Lee being there, it's like, oh, there's something really cool and romantic about that I still haven't lost. But when I seen Jim Lee's Hush, it was like, it was the first kind of comic I'd seen that was like, this is like, how do you even do this? You know? So it was like, that kind of set fire to me. It was like, oh my God. And then when I was 25, I was like, right, let's see how to figure this out. So it's then a process of, I'm sure, like yourself, figuring out how to go about everything. If you look back now, delusion is a great thing when you're young, because you always think at the stage you're at, you think, I could draw comics. Because if you didn't have that and you knew the road ahead of you, you'd be like, Jesus, man, that's a lot of work. I don't know if I can do that, you know? So there's a fine line there, I think. But like, yeah, trying to make that change, it literally was, I have to work after football. But I couldn't think of anything else I wanted to do. Not just as in like, oh, I enjoy it. It was like, I had this real weird kind of connection to comic books that was like, oh my God, I can't shake it. I had to go to the shop every day to see a new comic. It was like, this thing was like, how did they do this? And then to kind of understand, to read the comic then I read Mazzucchelli's and Frank Miller's Year One. It was like, so Hush is one thing, which is like a kind of operatic cinematic comic book, but then you read Year One and it's like, oh, this is a different thing altogether. I connected to that comic. It was like, I don't even understand how this is so seamless. And I was like, I got to figure this out. Well, I still haven't. I'm nowhere near it, but I want to try understand to figure it out, you know?
That's it. You know, I love that you say that, because I kind of hold that up as maybe like the greatest sort of comic arc, you know, Year One. I think it's just so masterfully done. And I love the idea of that it being a puzzle. And the idea that like it's this puzzle that has been laid out by, you know, these creators, and you go, how does this happen? You know, how is this being done at this level? And you know, you can kind of forensically break it all down, but it is really perfect. Like, it's just a perfect piece of story.
I think it is. Yeah, I genuinely do think it is. It's like it's hard to comprehend. Do you ever hear the saying, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know, right? So like, you know, like you said, to break something down, and it's like you try deconstruct Year One, and you're like, oh yeah, I can see why Frank Miller done that, and then it's like, and then he done that, and then it's like, but why do you do that? And then the more questions you answer, the more questions you have. You're just like, Jesus, man, I'm not Frank Miller or Dave Mazzucchelli. But like, trying to, that's what fascinates me about comic books and art. It's that goal of always trying to chase that, though. That's what, yeah, there's an understanding that you'll never be Alex Toth, but how close can you get to Alex Toth before you die? That's kind of what I'm chasing, you know? That's what I'm kind of chasing, you know?
Everyone used to always say, like, you know, because I always bite off these huge things. Like, I'm like, I want to do this. And so I set this goal, and the goal is ridiculously high. And people go, you know, and I have friends who'd be like, why do you want to do that? And I said, well, because if I fall short of this goal, I'm still so much further up than I was before.
Absolutely.
You don't fall down lower.
Yeah.
You advance. And that was always like my mentality. I'm like, well, yeah, if I want to draw like, you know, Alex Toth or Michael Golden, like, well, it'd be a real shame to be almost as good as Michael Golden.
Yeah, not many people get almost as good as Michael Golden, you know?
Right,
that's like it's kind of, I said to me fiance as well, it's like, I couldn't be more passionate about anything in my life. I'm more passionate about comics than I was about football. It's like, it's so weird. Like when I was younger, football was like everything to me, but like I'm so unbelievably passionate about comic books, but I'm also unbelievably passionate about being an artist and a draftsman, like trying to just get better all the time, you know? So like, God forbid comics is taken away, which I pray to God it's not. The kind of goal of being a better artist is what drives me. So I'm so fortunate that I get to get better and practice artwork and get paid to draw for Marvel. When I even say that out loud, it's like, how lucky is that? You know what I mean? I get to live like 2 minutes from my home house. I get to draw for Marvel. But the goal of being a better artist is what always drives me. So it's not just like, oh, that's great, I hit that deadline, it's subpar work. It's like, but did you hit that deadline with work that you can... I never say I'm proud of my work, but the work that you think holds up, that's okay to move on from and then go again, you know? So that's what kind of drives me all the time. So it's like, being a comic book artist, to get to do that, it's like, oh my God. And the byproduct of that, being a better artist, is kind of what I'm striving for all the time, you know?
Yeah, the phrase, oh, I really like this, just doesn't resonate with me. Like it's like you get it done, and it's like, can I just flush the toilet quick enough so I don't have to look at this thing? Because it's just...
You feel the same. Yeah.
Oh no,
that's amazing.
And it's funny because like I've transitioned to writing, and writing is about not the doing, so to speak, because you don't do it in one shot. Like you have to go back and you've got to read through the whole thing, and then you got to fix all that, and then you got to do that again. Like it doesn't, it's not. So like you were talking about art and like how people view it, like the judgment of art is immediate. Yes. So when a person looks at something, they can go, that doesn't look like a horse. And you go, oh God, you're right. It doesn't look like a horse. And
that's so true.
But no one looks at a novel and goes, well, that's just terrible. Like they have to invest weeks of their life to make a determination whether it was good or bad. And it's this insane sort of category. So like I went from doing a career that I would draw, superheroes and, try to do the best I could, but I could see my mistakes as I was going along and I was able to kind of categorize them. And then I went into a career as a designer where everybody is telling you what you're doing wrong because everyone has an opinion, and these designs aren't being done in a vacuum. There's a team involved. There's marketing and salespeople. And so everyone has a point of view, and you have to address these things. And then you go into this world of writing novels where it's just you alone,
right,
going over your own, and you have to make the effort to go find your mistakes and fix your mistakes with no sort of simple like, oh, well, there it is. Like you have to really.
That's fascinating. I actually want to ask you a question about writing now, but to talk about the artwork thing, it's like I always say this as well. It's like I have no ego attached to my artwork. Where like I know I've to get so much better because I want to get so much better. Some people can just go, I'm happy enough now. But it's like, no, I want it. I have a goal in mind. I want to get there, right? So like, if someone criticizes me art, when I used to go to conventions, I used to say to artists, I mean this in the bottom of my heart. You can critique me as hard as you want because I want to get to a place I want to get to quicker. Not to kind of outdo the other people, but like I want to just be better quicker. Not to make a shortcut out of it, just be better quicker. And it was like, it's no problem to break my art down because I might not see something to do that. So now when someone, say if I'm drawing a hand and like someone criticizes it, say, that's a bad hand. It's like, I'm not putting that down intentionally as a bad hand, but I'm not Joe Mad. Joe Mad draws amazing hands, right? So it's like I'm trying. It's like I understand the flaws in my artwork before you do. So Thomas, you can't hurt me. I'm trying my best to work on them. So it doesn't. It's like it just bounces off. It's like I understand, mate. I agree with you. It's like that's a crap hand. It's like I know, isn't it? I didn't mean to make it crap, but I'm trying to get better. Right. So it's like, but it's a fascinating one to me. Your transition from art into writing, because a lot of artists seem to do that. I was talking to an artist. I won't say his name because I don't know if he wants to get out. He was saying he's transitioning a lot more. He wants to transition into writing now and art. And I understand art is probably a lot more labour intensive, but I wouldn't say writing a novel isn't labour intensive either, is it?
Oh, it's terribly labour intensive.
Yeah, for sure.
I put 4 hours a day every work day of the week into writing. And I know that's not 16-hour drawing days, but it is 100% mental
cognitive
focus
of course,
for 4 hours of trying to excavate something from nothing into a cogent, character driven story. And the difference, comic books, drawing comic books is incredibly labor intensive, but there's a script. You're not making
Yes.
it up from nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so you are executing at the highest level possible based off of a map. You have a map. There's the route. Follow this route and, utilize your skill sets to make this the best thing possible. But that unknown of whatever it was with writing is this terribly tough, battle that you have to kind of wade into every time. And I'm not saying one's harder than the other, so don't anybody get bent out of shape on that.
Yeah.
Because I've done both. I know which hurts. I know the pains of sitting at a drawing table for week after week, hunched over. It's just a different type of struggle, and I think for me, when I made samples, I just made up the stories. And I wrote stories that I felt were going to showcase what I could do and what I thought an editor wanted to see. And that's what I did. I never used their scripts because I've always found like there was never a 4 or 5 page chunk which really allowed me to show off. And that was the thing. And then when it came time to actually do the job, I felt like, it was easy to come up with my own stories too. But I was terrified.
Of course.
Because for some reason words felt more permanent than a drawing, however odd that is. But in my mind, I had a very terrified fear of it. And it might just be because I was, slightly dyslexic and not a great reader.
That's incredible. Geez, that's an amazing achievement then, saying you have that to kind of be able to call yourself a writer. Like, that's amazing.
But it's what you were talking about, man. Like if you put it in your head and you put the goal there and you put the time in,
definitely.
It all comes together over time. You're not going to pick up a pencil and draw a comic book. No one ever can.
And I feel like there's some people that kind of, this goes as far as football as well, where like people in life I've come across want you to tell them not to follow their dreams because they're afraid of it and they don't want to do it, right? It's like, so someone says to me, hey, I didn't go to art school. I am exactly probably the opposite of every comic book artist that ever broke in. Alex, it's like I was a footballer. I didn't break in until I was 34. I didn't go to school. I taught myself. It's like, Jesus Christ. It's like, if he's not delusional, it's like anyone else can be just as delusional as him, So it's like some people have that where it's like, no, tell me I can't do it because I want to be told, because then I can kind of, and I don't mean it's a blame culture, but it's like they're afraid to take on the responsibility of not achieving their dreams, so they want someone else to tell them they can't. So that was the same as football, So I agree with you saying you put it in your mind, that's kind of it. Just going back quickly to the script thing, I did that with Batman, Alex, with my Batman samples. When I put them up, it was like I kind of looked for Batman samples online, and I understood editors wanted to see like expressions, and at that stage where you're kind of close, you understand exactly what people want to see in a script, right? And I'd done a lot of stuff with like expressions and quieter moments, and it wasn't really hitting the mark. You know what? I was like, fuck it. I'm writing my 8-page Batman story. I read my favorite Batman story ever is Kevin Nolan's Monsters in the Closet. It's just like artwork and writing. It's just the coolest. It's kind of what my Batman is, Yeah, it's like, it's incredible, right? So I was like, I'm going to write my own Batman story. I wrote an 8-page Batman Man-Bat story, and I ended up changing it to freeze actually for my samples. But I was like, I'm going to make it just, if I open a comic book, what would I want to see? Cool shot of the Batwing, the city, a cool shot of him uplit. I was like, fuck it, there's going to be no talking, there's going to be no expressions. I don't give a shit. I'm going to just put my heart and soul into these things, see what happens. And luckily enough, I had kind of enough stuff in there to show I could tell a story and stuff. But it was like that was it. I wrote it and kind of for myself, and was like, I'm just going to put my life and soul into that, rather than kind of thinking I'll do. And also, you understand that you have to give editors what they want, but like, let's just see if I can do it that way. Do you know what I mean? And I enjoyed the writing part of it,
Yeah. Well, and it's like, and I'm probably like the bane of many comic writers out there, because I'm always encouraging the artists to write, because it's just, you're one step away from the creation aspect of a story. So why not take the risk every so often and write that story? See what
Yeah,
happens. You never know.
definitely. Like, I'm fascinated by old comic book artists. Like, I eventually would love to, like, with a deadline that's decent enough. Obviously, I want to do monthlies as long as I can because I love it. But I'd love to, like, write, letter, color, ink, pen. Like, I want to just create a comic book. Like, my first comic. Are you gonna like that? That's the gold standard for me. That, Alex, that is
it's the gold standard.
That is it. See that there what you have shown. It's like my first comic ever. It's called Hellfire. I self-published a comic with a company here in Ireland, and I done that. I wrote it, lettered it, drew it, and stuff. But it was like I done that to teach myself every aspect of comics, so I could understand how other people worked in comics and stuff. But for me, like to do that, like. That to me shows the mastery of something that no one will ever understand if you pick up a comic just off the shelf. Like me and you will understand Cliff Chang wrote that and drew that. It's like that is just like it's too easy of a word almost to say mastery. It's just so well done. It's not even funny. But that would be like a goal for me. Like I said, deadlines pendant. You know what I mean? But like that's kind of where it would be.
Yeah. So to just for everybody, since we're not on a camera here. Audio. I picked up Catwoman Lonely City by Cliff Chang, which I beat the drum of saying this is really the gold standard to show what you can do, because to do that for one of the big two publishers is unheard of. It's unheard of. And
I understand, like, and I kind of like, I'm not really into the thing either, Alex, of like, now, I shouldn't have said that I'm not into it because every artist is different, every artist works different, and I'm only really early in this, but like taking like 4 years to do a book isn't something that would interest me, even if I read it. Like the way Cliff done that, like he different other projects and then he worked it, but he had a deadline, he stuck to his, like that to me is the beauty and the nuance of comics is, can you be good enough, quick enough, keep quality, and not kind of have to go into oblivion for 10 years and come back out with a book. Do you know what I mean? The beauty of comics is being in people's faces while keeping the work at a quality where it's amazing. And Cliff, I could never comment on his work. He is a genius. But like that's what I love about comic books. It's the monthly grind, but can you keep it going all the time, That's kind of what I love.
I mean, like, I mean, listen, and just, like football, I mean, like we live in a world of where we idolize superstars because they have these standout sort of these events in their life. But man, I mean, you can go comic books. You can look at all the, you're saying Joe Mad or, Jim Lee or John Byrne, or you name the monthly artist who just month after month of, great comic books, just great comic books. And that is an incredible task, to say the least. And, hats off to all those people. I just cite what Cliff did because, like you said, the idea of doing your, your opus, your magnum opus, like that's Cliff's magnum. And I don't know. I mean, Cliff may have like 4 or 5 more of those things in his, ready to go.
But I kind of I was actually agreeing with you. I was actually trying to give Cliff really props there, saying I don't think he went into oblivion for 5 years. Like he was still working on other projects like Paper Girls and stuff, probably as he was developing Batman, and he put that out in such a timely manner. Like that came out in trade paper and floppies first. Like so, I was like, I remember the time wasn't a long in between waiting on those issues. Like I think what he done is like, Jesus, it's incredible. You know what I mean? So I'm definitely agreeing with you there. Let me ask you one question, Alex, before we, if you don't mind, before we finish up. So for you to define a comic book artist, right? So you have fine artists, right? And then you have comic book artists, right? And for me, talking about that, deadlines and talking about time frames of books and stuff, at what stage does a comic book artist become a fine artist with how long they take to produce? It could be a graphic novel. I'm not even saying that, but do you think there is a time frame in that, or do you think sequential artwork is just comic books and you're a comic book artist no matter what?
I don't think sequential art is strictly commercial. It doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be. Okay.
The way I've always defined it is so my wife is an artist. She is a visual artist. She is a fine artist. And so people will meet us and they go, "Oh, it's so wonderful that you two are artists." And I'm like, my response is like, "I'm not an artist." And people go like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, "I'm a designer." And And I never considered myself as an artist when I did comic books.
Okay.
Because they are a product and there's a series of problem solving that has to be engaged with to get this product created on a timeline. And so the way I frame it in my head is that a designer or a commercial artist solves a problem, or I should say a fine artist solves a problem for one person themselves. This is the thing that I'm making for myself.
Okay.
It doesn't matter if anybody else gets it. A commercial artist or designer has to solve that problem for everybody.
Okay.
So when a publisher says you need to work on your storytelling, they're saying you're not solving this problem for everyone. Because if I don't understand what's happening on the page, it doesn't solve. Now, if somebody says, hey, I'm writing, drawing, coloring, funding, producing, publishing, and distributing my own thing, you can do whatever you want. Because there is no commercial enterprise outside of yourself. So if you just want to make the thing that you want to make, go at it, have fun, do the thing. But don't be angry if someone says, I don't understand this.
Of course. So do you think the production line then of comic books makes, when you said you didn't consider yourself an artist when you were a comic book artist, do you think the production line just makes you a part of the production line? Just you're selling a product that everyone is involved in?
Yeah. You're just you're employing artistic skill sets, but right. I don't really, because the way I frame it, I don't think I'm solving this problem for myself.
Okay.
I am taking a script that somebody else wrote and I'm interpreting this into a visual format. If I'm writing a script so somebody can interpret that into a visual format. That's all.
That's interesting. That's the first time I've heard that kind of point of view on that. Okay.
It's not very magical. It's not very happy, happy-go-lucky.
Yeah, it's like, when you break in, it's like the biggest thing you have to understand is like deadlines are key, right? It's like no matter how good you are, and obviously you have your certain examples that we've talked about ad nauseum in this podcast, but like someone's ready to come in and say, I'll hit that book on time, because all they want is a book on a shelf to be on time, right? It's like, and the more you understand that, it's like, that's you got to keep the quality up and the quickness up, and that's where it's kind of the beauty meets kind of the comic books then, doesn't it?
Quickness first, quality second.
Yeah.
I mean, as much as every editor would love to have the hottest artist in the world who has 70 billion followers on Instagram, if that person can't hit the deadline, the book is useless to them.
Absolutely. And that's like, I kind of tried to understand that early on, but now even more so. It's like, that page, don't get me wrong, that's why I'm trying to work these long hours to keep the quality up, and the quickness to get there. I mean, and I quite like working long anyway, but it's a real fine balance, because someone else come in and say, oh, well, your art's great. It's like, it doesn't matter. They can get someone else in. Yeah. You got to hit that deadline,
No, and it shows on every single page that that I've seen that you've sent over. I mean, you're putting all that time in, and the fact that you're like focusing every issue on improving something that you've identified, like that's a huge thing, rather than just saying, I'm in and I did it, so off I go.
That's good. I'm glad you think so, Alex. That's great. Thanks a million.
Yeah. Well, Danny, thank you for spending this time, man. This is absolutely a blast of a talk.
No, it's been amazing, mate. You know what? It's such a solitary job, mate. It's great to talk to anybody, but to talk to someone like-minded in comics as well, it's been amazing, mate. Thanks a million for having me.